Hey everyone, it's Andrew Nagel, and we're back with the next part of the Start to Finish Hybrid Series 2.0 Outer Wire Details. Earlier, we set the Super 7 Cabochon and 2 Peridot into this design. Now we're going to be building the top stone setting for it and also the outer wire details that will make up this piece. Starting with a length of 13 gauge half round wire, dead soft. I like working with dead soft for these larger gauges of wire because they're just easier to manipulate. We're going to attach that to the frame by wrapping the point around twice around the design. Start the swirl, and that little swirl will be the upper stone setting for this Super 7 Cabochon that will hold it in place. We're going to continue forming the bend. This is where those nylon-coated pliers really come into play. They help you form larger pieces of metal like this without leaving tool marks on them. I'm using it to form that bottom bend. Once that bottom bend is formed, you're ready to form the next part of this piece. I'm going to use another length of 13 gauge half round wire. I'm going to attach this to that top curve with 30 gauge round wire. Right now I'm just trying to match up the curve so that way I can start to form the top part of the detailing in this design. Bringing those together, it looks like a pretty good fit, at least good enough that we can start forming this. I like to just get that top curve just at the right shape so that way I can start fusing it together with the round wire, and once that wire is attached to the base, I then bring that wire to the half round wire that is already attached to the frame. Then I'm going to bring up that top curve and start to connect them together, and as I connect them together I'll be doing little micro bends and little adjustments to that outer wire to truly make it form around the curve that we've already made. I'm attaching the 30 gauge round wire to the frame, then wrapping it as a progression around that half round wire that is already attached. Now I'm bringing the top part, that top curve, up to this bottom curve, and we are going to attach them together with this 30 gauge round wire. This is dead soft wire. I prefer dead soft for this smaller gauge as well, again because it's easier to manipulate around these tight spaces. When you use half hard for this gauge, it starts to become a little annoying just because it doesn't really want to bend where you want it to and kind of wants to stay straight. The dead soft curves around the wire, but you do have to be careful about how hard you pull the wire and how sharp you bend it around the wire. You don't want to pull it too hard and pull it against that point on the half round wire because it can break it. I've experienced that with square wire as well. So just be kind to your wires and they'll be kind to you. I'm using a simple X-weave pattern to attach these two wires together, and then I'm going to progress it down the inner part of this bend on the inner length of half round wire with the round wire to continue this pattern down. I'll be adding a couple of little points where it attaches back up to the outer curve, but you can get creative here and do whatever sort of detailing you want to do on this line. You could do a weave pattern all the way down, play with the textures, play with leaving open spaces of the half round wire and spaces where it's connected together. This is where your creativity can take hold in these tutorials. Continuing down the inner length of half round wire, and I'm also forming my outer swirls. This is going to continue down these wires, and then I'm going to open up to a kind of a spiral weave detail that just fans open on the outside of this design, and then I'm going to curve those two ends of half round wire into the frame and connect them to some tie down points. So starting this opening weave pattern, some of you might be familiar with this, some of you might not be, but basically we have a length on the innermost wire that is longer than the outermost wire, and what I mean by that is that our inner curve is, obviously smaller than our outer curve, so we have more surface area to cover on our outer curve to make this wire fan open. I'm going to start wrapping it around twice around the innermost curve, and then once around the outermost curve, and as I progress, I'm going to go up to 3, then 4, then 5 on this longer curve, but I'm going to continue only connecting once around that innermost curve, the shorter curve, so that way I'm not covering as much detail. If I do them evenly, it will be an even progression, but if you do a longer length on your longer curve, that's how you result in a fanning open of that kind of web weave detail. I have a couple of other tutorials about it. You can search up on the channel if you want to go more in depth with that detail. As I'm connecting my 30 gauge to the frame, we're then going to be ready to connect our half round wire to the frame as well. I've clipped off my extra and I'm just bending that end corner of the half round wire into the frame, over the top part of the frame, and wrapping it around so that way it kind of feeds in between the frame and the wire detailing on the top. I've left that outermost wire open still. I'm going to keep that open until I'm ready to tie down everything to make this all, finalized. Forming our curve on the other side and using another length of 30 gauge round wire. I just work with my round wire from the spool until I'm ready to start feeding it through a point, as we're going to be doing on this opening web weave here. It's going to be the same progression. We're going to start with a 1-to-1 ratio, then that's going to go to 1-to-2 for the next weave, 1-to-3, 1-to-4, 1-to-5, and that's going to progress on until we build up this whole weave pattern here on this other side of the piece. There is a lot more area to cover here. So one way that you can do that is by doing a small progression of like a 1-to-2 ratio or a 1-to-3 for the beginning part of the weave, just to keep it tight. Just do a couple of those and then start opening your progression to the 1-to-4, 1-to-5, 1-to-6. And what I mean by 1-to-6 is like 1 on the innermost smaller curve and then, the larger number on the outside, since we have a larger surface area to cover on the outer curve. This is very similar to the weave detailing that we just did on the other side. This is just going to take a bit longer to do because we have a wider area to cover. So I'm going once around that innermost curve, feeding my wire through, and then taking that wire across and over and connecting it to the outside. And then I'm going once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and then I'm crossing it back over, and then the next progression will be 6. And so that's how you keep fanning this open. Earlier I did 1-to-2, 1-to-3, 1-to-4, 1-to-5, and then this will be 1-to-6. And you just keep progressing on like that until you are ready to finish your detail. Feeding that 30 gauge wire around the innermost curve and then back out, and then I will do 7 on this next one, and I will just continue that progression until I have a nice opening detail and we're ready to close it off. Getting down towards the end, as you can see, this spirals open a bit more. I don't like to get much past like 9 on these, and so once it gets to the end, I'll keep doing a progression of like 1-to-8 or 1-to-9, just because I don't want to open it too much. I am going to add some other wires into those open spaces to create a bit more depth and add more detail to it, but that will be in the final detailing part in the next video. Progressing on, we are still using the opening between the stone and that half round wire to feed our 30 gauge through, and then I'm wrapping it around a couple more times just to finalize on this inner side, and then I'm going to feed that wire through to the back and I'm going to tie it down to the frame. Make sure you tie down all of your 30 gauges to the frame, either tie them together to another 30 gauge and then to the frame, or individually to the frame as I'm doing now. This is where small pliers come into hand and, or help you guide that 30 gauge through those small gaps in your frame. Now I'm taking a length of 20 gauge square wire and I'm attaching this to the frame kind of with my half round wire on the frame there. I've attached that innermost point as well. This is where all the tie downs are going to start happening. And what I'm going to do is just run this line as a curve against my other curves, so that way I've just got a nice flush shiny line that's going to be at the top of the piece, and that will attach back down into the pendant onto the frame and go into the tie down point here near the bottom of this spiral weave detail that we've opened up here to the stone. I'm going to add some other detailing wires into that weave, but that will be in the next video. Attaching that wire to the frame, and then now curving in the last length of half round wire that we've added here. I'm going to be tying that into the frame as well. And now our stone, the Super 7 Cabochon, the only way it could fall out of that setting was through the top. Now it's been locked in with the detailing that we've done here, and also that first length of half round wire specifically, that's what's holding in the stone at the top there, since there's no bezel setting at the top. So I hope you all enjoyed this detailing video. In the next one, we will be adding another stone and doing some final detailing, and then in the video after that, the final polishing and oxidization. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you have a wonderful week.